Hi, welcome to the Complex Lead Generation Made Simple Teleseminar. This is, we're in the tail end of March, and what this talk is about is, I want you to walk away with this. If you're involved in complex sales, I don't want you to get lost in the details. So this is really geared towards management, towards owners, towards sales managers, marketing people who are involved in and I guess in the definition of complex sales. So if I'm thinking of consulting groups, advisors, people who sell technology, complex technology, or other enterprise sales, and this topic would be important to you because as soon as you've labeled a sales process as complex, it's like you've given permission to the organization to hide from results or to make results seem like they're hard to achieve. So I'm going to advocate, and you'll hear me do this all the time, advocate for keeping it simple. I was reading an article about Goldman Sachs, and they were talking about, it was an article about robotics and artificial intelligence, and the article said, there used to be a floor of 700 people that were on this trading desk that was on the floor, and what they were able to do is replace them, or most of them, with technology, so artificial intelligence. The article was about basically how robots are taking over and running with that, but what I took from it was inside there they had identified 143 distinct steps. So when we talk about complex sales, they had identified 143 independent steps. Hold on one second. And in those 143 steps, that's what made it complex, right? So it wasn't like any one of those 143 individual steps were complex in their own, on their own. So, but putting them all together, that's what makes the whole thing complex. That's what made it such an achievement for them to be able to use artificial intelligence to replace, and unfortunately I say replace these employees, but that's essentially what happens. So the complex sales process to me is one in which you're identifying it as complex because it has so many steps. I'm going to talk about how I go into a situation like that and make it simple. So people can use this, like you can use it inside your company, but then I've also had, I know I have a few consultants who listen to these things, and you can actually take this as part of your methodology as you're out working with clients. So here's how the whole thing is structured, I am going to talk about how to frame these complex selling situations when working with clients with 4 big concepts, and then I'll give you 8 tactics right after that you can put to use immediately so that you don't walk away from this. Usually they last about 45 minutes, but so you don't walk away with, wow, that was a lot of ideas, but I don't know what to do next. We'll talk about how to put one of these to use immediately. So let's start with the big ideas. Most of my big ideas start in the same place, which is know where you are today. So you got to start where you are, assuming you know where you are. So the reason this is so important is because if we don't have a clear idea as to where we are today, it's really hard to adjust later. It's important to you because you need to show progress. You need to be able to troubleshoot, and you need something to compare against so that you can show progress. So it's like climbing a hill, right? You just need to be able to look back down and say, hey, we were there. We need to still go all the way up there, but at least we're making progress. So how do you do it? The easiest way is to assign someone to and just ask them for a snapshot of everything they consider to be a KPI. And if you're work through the organization that way, what are the KPIs and what are they today? Then we have something to work with where we can see what we're impacting going forward. So in a complex sales process, that can include anything like average contacts per company, literature requests, proposals from the marketing side, or literature requests from the marketing side or proposals from the sales side. Sometimes you get lucky in this process and you capture everything that was going to be important to you in a year from today, but most of the time just going through the exercise is enough to at least identify where this data is hiding So when you get to be a year from now and you're like, boy, it's too bad we weren't tracking this, because I think that's where it's showing up. You at least know where to look to go backwards. So it's kind of serves a dual purpose. One is it tells you where you are today, but then the other thing is that it's an exercise that helps you identify where you're supposed to be. So I work with a heavy equipment retailer and wholesaler. Actually, they do both retail and wholesale. And in our initial conversation, we had this big overview that we titled, "These are the things that you should do." They didn't actually hire me at that moment, and so they took all those instructions and they started implementing everything we talked about. They took great notes and literally just started going after everything we talked about. And guess what? Their key indicator that they were after, it went up. That was revenue. Unfortunately, when they pulled me back in, they said, "Okay, Greg, we're seeing increased revenue. We're ready to have you help us." We were still in the same place. We were as blind as we were the day that I came in the first time. We were at square one. So with that story, I'm an advocate for action. Take action. They were better off than they would have been if they had done nothing. But at the same time, if you could just take a second pause and collect a really nice snapshot of where you are today, it makes everything in the future that much easier. That's big idea number one. Big idea number two is avoiding the Tower of Babel. So this is common language, right? The old story in the Bible about the Tower of Babel and trying to build up to reach God and to to strike against the hubris of man, made it so that they couldn't communicate with each other. Right? It ended the project. They were only able to get so far because they could no longer communicate with each other. So the beginning of wisdom, right, is the definition of terms, and that's what Socrates said. So that's where you and your team need to start. For instance, the term lead generation, even that is too broad. So for this teleseminar, we would even break that down. I'd say, well, who am I talking to? So if it's a marketing person, we're talking about marketing qualified leads, right? Those are leads that a marketing person would consider qualified. On the other side are sales qualified leads. And you'd love for that Venn diagram to just be one solid circle, but it's not. Sometimes there's very little crossover between what each side considers to be a good lead. And that's the importance of language. So it's just about effective communication. And I get burned on this all the time. The last was a term. I was talking to a client, and we'd been talking about landing pages for so long that I was wasting time, because I think of landing pages on websites as places where paid ads show up. So I take out a paid ad, I direct you to a page, that page is your landing page. For them, it was any page on the website. And both terms are correct, right? Anywhere you land is your landing page when you come to a website. But by us not communicating effectively that way, we were trying to build two completely different things. So we're back on track and making progress, but that close but not the same is what slows everything down. And speed is what you're after when you're trying to work with complex leads, right? Complex lead generation, trying to shorten that complex sales cycle. So start with identifying the marketing sales cycle terms. That's what I would do is, hey, marketing, how would you describe the marketing cycle? And then I'd even ask them, how would you describe the sales cycle? And get those things down. And then we go over to the sales side and we say the exact same things. How would you describe the marketing cycle, and how would you describe the sales cycle? The process that your customers go through. How many steps? What are they called? What separates someone from one step and another step? The process sounds painful as I throw it out, but it's really the most enjoyable part of most engagements, because that's where healthy discussion takes place. Somebody says, "Oh, I've always used a 3-step sales process," and then somebody else says, "Well, you're crazy. It's 7 steps." Sandler has 7 steps. I forget what Sandler has, but this is how I learned. Getting everybody on the same page is the most important part. Salespeople are notoriously anti-confrontation when it comes to anything that relates to leads and compensation. And so my only advice there is encourage them to debate and come to a universal conclusion of what it means for your company. So in my case, what is the Chambers Pivot Industries sales cycle look like and defined? What separates somebody from interest to whatever the next stage is? Here, I should probably have my sales cycle out in front of me. So I mentioned landing pages as a term that I just needed to clear up last week. A consultant, as a consultant, the benefit for me is I'm really agnostic when it comes to these things. I'm not a stickler for a company being, I am a stickler for the company being on the same page, but if marketing and sales have completely different ideas as to what mine are, I don't care. I need them to be on the same page because ultimately when I leave, they need to be better off, and that is one way to do it. So if the first step, the first big idea is know where you are today. The second big idea is avoid the Tower of Babel. Get on the same page. So let's move on to the third one. So the third big idea is lead and follow. You need to learn your customers' dance steps. And what I mean by that is you need to detail the customer decision process vis-a-vis your sales process. So your customers follow a general process for making decisions about your products, your services. Your marketing and sales functions follow a general process for selling your products, right? These steps need to be published, and it needs to be your view from inside your company of both sides, from how the customer finds products like yours to how they decide to bring one in. So that's what I mean by lead and follow, learn your customers' dance steps. And it's important because it's that common language thing again. Prospects are not all prospects in the same sense, right? Customers are not all customers in the same sense. A map of where you think they make decisions and how you want your sales process mapped to that, that makes the whole troubleshooting process to get to faster, to shorten the sales process and to get more results faster. That makes it all easier. So the way to do that is to it's just like getting on the same page for language. In this case, I would use a big board in a public place and having everybody, all interested parties, comment on it. So, but again, that's mostly the internal part. Where it differs from common language is you also need to get some input from customers and prospects, but I don't know that you necessarily, I wouldn't show them both processes. I would just ask them, do you remember the process for getting this going with us? Something along those lines. If you ask all the stakeholders involved in their process, right? If it's a complex process, there's probably multiple decision makers. If you get input from most of those roles, it will help you map the process. So one time literally asking that question, do you remember the process for getting this going, put it in the help desk. Is where everything had originated. They were the first ones to notice the problem. When it came to picking the decision, they were actually not involved because it was an accounting solution, more robust accounting software, but the help desk is where it originated. So you should be saying to yourself as you ask these questions, oh, I didn't know that, right? I don't know what to do with this information because it's that common. So, but that's how you know you're on that. You should. If you're on the right track, your team will start talking like that. Well, I didn't know that, and mostly because they're talking to the customers. So, in this process, that idea of where did this originate, where did it come from, and it came from Paul on the help desk, was enough to jar loose of substantial sale, and not in that company. It was actually just giving that broad example, because I'm not allowed to use the company's name, and so I keep it pretty vague. But as I was describing it in those vague terms, one of the sales reps who happened to be involved in the seminar, in the workshop that we were going through, it helped him figure out why a PO was stuck in procurement. So, as he said, stuck in procurement. So he went back to his original contact and asked where everything started, right? She started him she directed him to a temporary onboarding unit at this insurance company that he was working with. And this insurance company, they ramped up a ton of temp workers once a year for 3 months. and it was during renewals. So they ramped them up, then they ramped them down. That being said, it handled that segment of the business handled 75% of premium. So it was a mission critical piece of the business. Once he had that information, and actually once he had that stakeholder, once that stakeholder was informed that this is stuck in procurement, that's what jammed it free, right? And that's what made the big sale for him that quarter. And that's this process, right? So if you detail the customer's decision process and your sales process, those are the benefits of what comes out of it. So that's big idea number 3, lead and follow. Learn your customer's damn steps as well as you know your own, so that you can lead and follow. And number 4 is actually what I'm going to write a book about. The revenue is everybody's business. Everybody in your company should think this: revenue is my business. Like, revenue for this company is my business, even if it's not my particular role. And where I see this most is getting marketing to talk revenue, right? Because I work with a lot of sales and marketing people, but really it's getting everyone to talk revenue. So this could be part of, it's almost the same thing as use the same words, but it's different. The idea that everyone in the company is responsible for revenue. So say, starting with marketing, they can't say that's sales. Well, that's sales. That's responsible for that. Everybody knows that they should be responsible for revenue, but it's a topic of discussion for everybody. It's the marker for how well we're doing with customers, right? A new chiropractor that I'm talking to, one of the things that he doesn't generate revenue, he's not really doing a lot for the community, is one way to look at that. And that's why revenue is his responsibility in that micro sense. But in the macro sense of your bigger company, that's also the case. So when everyone knows the score, they can all, it's important because when everyone knows the score, they can all work towards making it better. So companies that keep their revenue talk under wraps are like, they remind me of those little soccer teams where nobody keeps score because they don't want to hurt any feelings, right? Because it's micro soccer, but everyone knows what the score is, and the kids especially know what the score is. So you need to control the narrative, right? We hear a lot about controlling the narrative. When it comes to revenue and your company, you need to control the narrative. So start with this question for your entire staff. You've heard $1 saved is $1 earned, and that's true, especially here in our company. How much do we have to sell to earn $1? Right? If $1 saved is $1 earned, how much do we need to sell in new revenue to earn that same dollar? So having that discussion over and over again sounds monotonous, but never discount the idea that it takes as much as $10, that not everybody knows that it takes $10 sold to equal $1 earned. Right? You want to teach them how to watch costs, but be looking for revenue, because that $9 difference is what pays your salary, right? That's what pays for new people. That's expense. So when I worked for a really small clothing manufacturer, and we started these talks with everybody. So I thought it was going to be the benefit of the warehouse staff is, they don't seem to think about this, but they can do so much to help us because they have a lot more contact with the customers than we probably appreciated. So you can imagine my surprise and concern when it was my creative team on the marketing side that were like, oh, interesting. I never thought about it that way. So these are the same people that were telling me they'd been there for 4 years without a raise, right? As revenues are declining each year, they're like, hey, we've been here for 4 years and we never get a raise. So never overestimate your workers' business acumen. Understand that what is natural to you might not be natural to them, so help them learn. And the way to help them learn is to have that conversation on a regular basis. We need to be looking for new revenue. We need to make it cost effective, how we get that new revenue. And we also need to watch expenses all the way along because every time we add a fixed expense, it challenges the business that much more, right? Get them to think about that until they become better at it. That also solves the problem of at some point people get to like, gosh, you just bought a new house, or you just went on vacation. I never get to go on vacation. How come I don't get? That's not fair, right? How come I don't get what they get? Half the time when I have deeper conversations with those people, they don't actually understand how the company makes money, and they don't understand how the owner made their money. So get them curious by talking about it. So those are the 4 big ideas for you. The big one, start where you are, assuming you know where you are. And then avoid the Tower of Babel, so get on the same page with language. Lead and follow, learn your customers' dance steps, so as well as your own, so that you can both lead and follow. And revenue is everyone's business. Get everybody in your company talking about that. So Greg, what does this have to do with complex lead generation? As I was saying up front, the mapping of the process, like making something complex simpler, does a couple of things. One is it facilitates conversation, right? Even though we know that it's still, to sell consulting services to a multinational is a complex process. Breaking it down into manageable steps that everybody can work on and that create the behaviors that we want are what makes this process easier to work with. So let me go into some tactics that might make this a little clearer. So the first thing I do, and what you can't see me doing right now, is I am making a cross with my hands, and it is make sure you're talking to your customers where they are. So if you can imagine this, on your x-axis going across, your product complexity and your buyer's budget control are the things that are in conflict, right? If you have a simple product and they have a simple low-level budget control, right? So I have $100 and you have something that costs $100, then we need to meet that. It's all set, and that's all that we're after to get that decision. What we're talking about is complex, right? Which is complex products, so it's not just off the shelf. And then usually our buyers have more of a budget prioritization. They can pull budget from multiple places if it's going to benefit the business. Okay, so that cross that I'm making helps me orient where we're at. If I'm speaking to somebody in the wrong language because I'm assuming that it's a simple product and that they have a set budget amount, right? That's a make it easy for me to purchase this. If I'm trying to make it easy for them to purchase that, but really what it is they can allocate a lot of budget, and the product is actually very complex to them. They need enlightenment as to what the product can do for them. Does this make sense? So the way to do this is draw a grid out, and I don't know if you're sitting in front of a piece of paper that you can do this, but if you draw an x-axis across, that's product complexity, right? So that's from less is on the left-hand side and more is on the other side, right? So the very extreme is a super complex product, right? And then if you draw on the y-axis, up at the top is I have ultimate budget control, and at the bottom I have 0 to no budget control. I'm told how much I can spend, and I don't really get to waver from that. That grid, the lower left-hand side is make it easy for me to buy, right? Simple product, and I have a set budget. Up in the upper right is the complex product and unlimited budget, right? Control, unlimited budget control. That is the enlighten me. So all my conversations really need to be about what can happen and what the future can be like. The issue that I see is that what happens is there's a drift that happens inside of companies, and it's not necessarily on the buyer side. One is we drift down too far in the we drift away from the people who have budget control into the people that have set budgets. That's one drift that happens. But the other drift is that we think that our products are a lot less complex than they are, because they are less complex to us than they are to our customers. So when that drift happens, I was at a trade show, and there was what I considered a complex financial instrument that was being sold for lawyers. And I was listening to, since I was next to this person, I could hear them talking to the lawyers, the law firms, as they were coming up and kind of asking about this financing program that they had for cases. And it became clear really quickly that the finance people knew so much about finance that they were trying to describe a way to make this whole transaction easy to these lawyers, but the lawyers had no idea. So they were trying to fit it in. They were trying to say, let us teach you how this product works. But what the lawyers really needed was, they were like, we know nothing about finance. So to us, our product is super complex, and I have ultimate budget control. So you just need to show me, like, why is it that I would do this? They couldn't answer. That's the question that they needed to have answered, is why. So match the pitch to the customer's view is the idea there on, and that should be a question that you're asking at every stage along the way with your customers. So that's tactic number one. Here's tactic number two. Talk to customers. Go to the source face-to-face with customers. If you hear, and the key indicator when I hear it is somebody says, well, what they want from us is, and then they fill in the blank, right? You need to ask who. Like, who specifically say that? Marketers need to be in direct contact with customers, period. So leadership in a company needs to be talking directly to customers. And this is important because small customers are right next to the company, companies, right? But as companies grow, fewer employees are in direct contact with customers. So there's more guessing, and that's not good. No guessing. Get in front of your customers, and that's triply important for the marketing team. So how do you do that? Just start with surveys. Call them. Don't just send them a survey monkey, but call them and have a set of questions you want answers to. It's really that simple. The pushback is that clients and prospects are kind of treated like China eggs, right? So sales gets a little leery. Sometimes our best customers we're afraid to ask them questions because something bad might happen. You need to move beyond that. They're just people. So find out how they do things, and the only way to do that is by asking. So that's tactic number two, is get face-to-face with your customers. Here's tactic number three, is oversimplify your reporting, especially to start. Some of these dashboards that get presented to me are devilish. Sure, your team needs to know all the gears and levers. Somebody needs to know how everything works together, but first you need a simple number to watch and move. So pick one of those to start. And this is important because so many conversations get bogged down in detail, especially when there's a lot unknown, as in a complex sale. When there's 143 individual steps, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but you still need to move on assumptions, right? That's Miller Heiman's whole deal, right? Is get to the no guessing part, get rid of it. So don't make your reporting so complex that the discussion gets too far off of what's actually happening. So I like to I just say we're going to start by turning in reports with one number on them. And that forces anybody who's producing reports to pick a number, know all the numbers, but then in the end they only present one. So like a sales qualified lead according to the Salesforce, that would be a number. So in the end, the only number that we're reporting up to the top to management is how many new sales qualified leads are we producing. And even if it's zero, all it does is start discussion, right? And good reporting should do that. Good reporting should start discussion. So start simply before, and then learn from there. I guess there's nowhere else to go with that. Number 4, publish your decision map publicly. So if your customer decision map is not somewhere that everybody can see, then make that happen. Everybody should see it. Everybody from the CEO to the dock worker. So how do you become customer focused? Is the question I'm usually responding to. We over-communicate about the customer to the employees. So by having a map that people can think about, this is how our customers decide to use us, and they can start asking themselves questions like, why do you think they stick with us? When do they leave us? How do we get them back? So the best examples are like the McKinsey customer decision journey, and you need to, I'll link that when I make the document. I'll include a copy of this, as well as that product complexity and budget control grid. But that McKinsey customer decision journey, if you pull it up, it's a simple circle, but it's got, 5 spots on it, right? Your marketing team can make something like that is easy for everybody to relate to, not a giant infographic where it has 100 different numbers on it and everything. We want something simple. That customer decision journey, I think it has 5 labels, and it serves as a starting point for most discussions. So what are we talking about here? Where are they on this? Right here. Oh, they've already made a purchase, and this is okay. So they've already worked themselves around the circle once, and now they're on this rediscovery process. It helps get, especially if you're trying to get all your people to take responsibility for revenue, then you really need to take that means take responsibility for our customers. So that's number 4. Number 5, I'm back to it. Talk revenue with everyone in the company. So it's one thing to say, gosh, everybody should be responsible for revenue and talk about revenue. Tied to having that decision process posted, have your revenue posted. Everyone can guess it right now, and everyone does guess what it is. So make it public, and then show progress towards the goal. Everybody depends on it. Don't keep it a secret. I get a pushback on this because people don't think that their leaders, especially, don't think their employees are going to be able to be trusted with the information. And what they really mean by that is not that they're going to leak it around, but that they can be trusted to interpret it correctly. Just like the initial discussion of this, they do it already. Guess what? Secret's out. They are already making judgments, and if they don't have the right information, they can go wildly off base. So teach them. You need to control the narrative. The sooner they understand that a dollar sold is not a dollar made, the more value they can provide to customers. So again, like I mentioned, I'm writing a book about this right now, but the simplest way to get started is by communicating strategic direction as often as you can. So they'll want details, your people will, but keep giving them the vision of the future, and then follow that. If you're making decisions that will get us closer to that vision of my vision of the future, then you're on the right track. And this is roughly what it means revenue-wise, but really it's more than that, right? This is about who we are and what we're trying to do. If you're describing that and then working it back to what the revenue is today, and teaching them about what revenue really means inside their company, you'll be on the right track. So talk about revenue with everyone in the company. No talk of mine is complete without talking a little bit about automation. So let's do that. Automate what you can when it comes to a complex decision, a complex lead generation process. So at all stages, you want to track activities. The website is where everybody congregates anymore, right? It's the place where everybody comes through. Excuse me. You need to build or buy tools that orient everyone through the site. It is literally, it's the best way. I know companies have intranets and extranets, and if there's a place where your customers and your people can interact, it should be related to the website. So can that entire customer decision process be tracked? Probably not, right? The idea that Amazon's following us around with drones is not real, but if it could, it probably does involve the website, right? So make sure your site can track what it can from inception, from when people, the companies that you're working with start getting onto your idea to how they actually onboard. It should be just part of, it shouldn't just be for market, like a marketing brochure. It should be part of operations anymore. So, and I catch myself saying tracking. What I'm saying is that all the silos of information should flow through one central point. So tell your people you want that point to be a website, and your data should be in the cloud. Prospect, customers, marketers, sales, finance, everybody, customer service, they should all be working through one place. I don't know exactly what the size of your organization is, but I know this request can get hairy. It gets complex. So my advice is to keep pushing for it, because if it's on a spreadsheet, this is the way to illustrate it to your IT people. If it's on a spreadsheet in someone's desktop or their laptop, and I can't access it when their desktop or laptop is closed, it's not helping the organization. So with that in mind, they should be able to come up with solutions that help you. So that's number 6. Automate what you can. Number 7, if you are doing content marketing, which most complex lead generation marketing people are doing, match content to the decision step. So what that is if you have content part of your marketing strategy, then match that content to the stage of the decision process your customer is probably in. And that keeps content from being weak and generic and going unused. Content marketing strategies are the struggle because, one, they're not done consistently. That's the first one. But two, they're not really mapped to the decision process, right? A question up front about where in this process is this going to help somebody will go well. It does way more than building a persona and focusing on voice. It's just simply asking where in the process are they going to consume this. So how you do it is just that. Where is this going to be consumed? Early in the decision process? Late? That question is all we need to ask. If you can read it and you can't figure out where it fits, then ask again. In general, if it's early in the decision process, it needs to be less salesy, very informative, and probably even includes competitor, like broad competition, competitive information. If it's late in the sales cycle, it needs to really be salesy, and it needs to only talk about you. That's one way to look at it. So I give these talks all the time, and I got a call from a client who had heard me talk about it, and they put a new report on their homepage, basically encouraging new visitors to pull down a Why Us brochure. The issue was that the report was actually titled something along the lines of 3 things you need to know about their main subject, not 3 things that we need to know about why they should choose us. So, right? Sometimes the title itself is what entices the content, as it entices the complex journey. So make sure that those match as you go through the process. So that's number 7. Number 8, keep that sales pipeline clean. So in my world, there is a delineation between sales pipelines, which work towards the end of the sales cycle, and marketing pipelines, which include everything, including people who have no idea who you are. So don't let your sales team hide behind a giant database. If there are marketing qualified leads in your database, get them segmented until they are sales qualified leads. And this is strictly about salesperson productivity. I was working with the client, and this is not a complex process that they are engaged in. It's much simpler. The sales cycles are short, but they generate tons of leads, and all those leads were going right into the sales people. And then it didn't sound like a big deal because they're like, oh, well, I mean, everybody gets followed up on. Yeah, they get followed up on if they purchase, but if the close rate is only 20%, there was 80% of those leads that weren't closing right away. And then they were gumming up the works, right? Because no salesperson is going to get rid of anything that may provide them with a check later on. So month 1, no big deal. Month 2, month 3, by 4 months in, even new hot leads are going by the wayside. So you can't exactly take things away from salespeople without them getting testy. But if it's not a sales qualified lead for sales, then it should be in some sort of holding pattern in the cloud. And that's where that technology that I talked about in number 6 could make that happen. So we don't want to mix the early stage with the late stage. Don't keep it. Don't like put it in a lockbox where salespeople can't see it. Let them at least see it so that they don't freak out. But get them to only focus on the end of the sales cycle and those things that they think are at the end of the sales cycle. That puts more pressure on marketing to help qualify making more leads, which puts more pressure on the organization to generate more sales. So that's it. So what I've done there is I just kind of rolled through those complex lead generation, trying to make that a little simpler for you. It's still ultimately complex lead generation is still lead generation. The complexity comes from the number of buyers and influencers involved, which creates multiple steps. So that's really an internal thing on your side, more than it is on the customer side. The customers never describe their buying process like, oh, our buying process is very complex. They may say, we'd rather not buy anything, right? We'd rather just go sell more of our own stuff. But it's it's on your side. And if you're calling it complex, that probably isn't helping. So your job is to help your prospects and customers make a good decision, right? Which involves elevating no to the equivalent of yes as far as they're concerned. So they say, we want to work with you because you help us make a good decision, yes or no. So pick a tactic today. That's one of these 8 that I just read through, which are, once again, make sure you're talking to the customers where they are in the process by having that product complexity, budget control conversation. Go to the source, get face-to-face with as many customers as possible throughout the organization so you understand where they're at. Oversimplify all your reporting, especially to start. If you have a really complex report right now, spend 6 months with a single metric and see what that does for your business. It will change it dramatically. Publish your decision map. How you want the decision process to go, both from an internal sales function to an external, how you think the customers are doing it. Get that out in front of everybody. As well as while you're doing that, talk about revenue with your entire company. Automate where you can and match your content to a decision step and keep your sales pipeline pristine clean. So that's it. Pick one and start putting it together right now. So note where you are today, make it better. The process of developing complex leads will get easier because what ends up happening is you start working with more, and as you work with more leads, everything gets easier. And that's what I want you to walk away with. Don't get lost in the details because the basics of lead generation are the exact same, and that's why I'm able to do it regardless of the organization. Because I know it's more on your internal side than it is on the customer's side. So I hope that helps. If I can help you in any way, as always, reach out, give me a call, take me to lunch, fly me out, and otherwise I will talk to you later. Thanks.